Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. For those of you I haven't met, I am Melissa McKinley, president of Kelly Cawthorn, and we are so grateful for you to join us for this very special webinar event we have today. We're honored to welcome a leader who needs little introduction to anyone familiar with Detroit's extraordinary transformation over the past decade. Mayor Mike Duggan has served as the mayor of Detroit since 2014 and is now in his third term. Under his leadership, Detroit has undergone a remarkable resurgence. From bankruptcy to balanced budgets, from blight to redevelopment, from population decline to neighborhood reinvestment. Mayor Duggan has been widely recognized for his data-driven, results-oriented approach to governance. Whether it's improving city services, expanding affordable housing, building stronger public-private partnerships, or championing equitable economic growth, his administration has become a national model for urban revitalization. Today, we're really excited to hear directly from Mayor Duggan about the challenges and opportunities facing cities like Detroit and how public policy, innovation, and strategic investment are shaping the future of urban communities across Michigan and beyond, and his vision for the future of the state of Michigan as he runs for governor, the next governor of the state of Michigan. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Mike Duggan. Mayor, we're so excited to hear from you today.
Well, thank you for doing this, Melissa, and for everybody taking the time. Just tell you a few minutes about where I am. I think you probably know my background, and then mostly I want to address the questions that your clients have. But when I ran for mayor in 2013, I didn't necessarily run on a promise to turn the street lights on or cut the grass in the parks or bring the crime rate down. Literally every candidate promised those things. You couldn't distinguish when the candidates all tell you what you want to hear. What I talked about was changing the politics in the city, because as the city had declined, ended up with 47,000 abandoned houses and ended up in bankruptcy with the highest unemployment rate, the highest murder rate in America. One of the most popular TV shows in Detroit was the nightly rerun of Detroit City Council meetings. People would come home and turn on their TV and watch the chaos and the insults and the fighting. And the thing about it was, the faster the city declined, the more the elected officials realized they didn't have any accomplishments to run on. And so the way they got reelected was being the loudest and most eloquent at blaming somebody else for the problems. And it became a competition to blame the suburbs, blame Lansing, blame Washington, blame the business community. And as we did that, we just drove farther and farther into a state of hopelessness. And so not many people thought that a white guy could run for mayor in a city that was 83% Black. We hadn't had a white candidate in 40 years. But I campaigned by just saying to people, invite me to your house. And the core message I had was this. I just appealed to the common sense of voters. And I said, as long as we have elected officials attacking the business community, nobody's going to invest here. As long as we have elected officials attacking Lansing, nobody's going to want to help us. As long as you keep attacking the suburbs, nobody's going to want to partner with us. That I want to put an end to us versus them politics. And it shouldn't matter if you're Black or brown or white or Christian or Jewish or Muslim or gay or straight. I told people in those homes, we're going to build a city that includes everybody. And I kept getting told by political consultants in the course of it, you can't campaign like that, you'll lose. But I carried 92% of the precincts in the city. The average voter didn't want the conflict. They just wanted their streetlights on. They wanted their kid to be able to ride a bike down the street without having to worry about going past the drug house. And so you've seen what's happened in Detroit. And we've dropped the homicides the fewest since 1965, and we will set a new record low this year. You might have noticed we are one of the very few cities in America that Donald Trump has not suggested the National Guard come into because we are on our way to another record low, actually in partnership with the Trump Justice Department and what we're doing. We brought in many manufacturing firms, including a 5,000 employee Jeep assembly plant, because the council and I work together. We don't have drama. We don't have fighting. I haven't vetoed an action at city council in 12 years. It's not that we don't have disagreements. It's we spend hours in a room finding common ground. And I'm really pleased that people running to be my successor are all running on themes of unity and building on the progress we've made. But I look at the state of Michigan, and it just reminds me so much of Detroit 12 years ago. This toxic Republican versus Democratic politics in Lansing is killing the state. And it's not going to change. We're going to have an evenly divided legislature for years to come. It may swing a few votes one way or another, Republican or Democrat. There might be times when one side or another gets a trifecta, but when the other side gets their trifecta, they'll just repeal what they did anyway. It's to me, it's ping pong politics. It keeps going back and forth. And why uh, uh, donors continue to fund this is beyond me, because you're not making any progress. And so I've been dealing with Lansing for a long time. I always had good success with Republicans and Democrats. The last 4 years, can't get anything done. And I looked at this and said, if I could be elected a whole lot easier running as a Democrat. But then I'd be in exactly the same boat Gretchen Whitmer's in today, where all the Republicans line up against her because as a Democrat, she tried to beat them all in their rep and Senate races. The left wing of the Democratic Party isn't any bigger fans of hers than they are mine. And you're seeing the paralysis that's resulting. And I looked at this and said, the only way to change the direction of this state is to change the politics. And I'm a person, Melissa, as you mentioned, I'm obsessed with metrics. I study everything before I make a decision, and I do make decisions on facts. And what the numbers show is Gallup for the last 40 years has polled Americans. And this year, 27% consider themselves a Democrat, all-time low. 27% consider themselves a Republican, all-time low. 43% consider themselves independents, all-time high. The solution is sitting there in plain sight. And so I thought, I think people may be tired of politics as usual. And I thought, what if I run a race where I'm not going to get involved in any state rep or state Senate race? I don't care if you support the Democratic Senate candidates, the House Republican candidates, doesn't matter to me. I'm going to work with both sides when they get there. And when you see the numbers that more than 60% of our third graders do not read at grade level, and that's the state of Michigan report that came out 2 weeks ago, more than 60% don't read at grade level. And it's been declining for 25 years, and it's been declining through Republican and Democratic governors. It's been declining as Republican and Democratic legislators keep changing the standards, the curriculums, the reading materials to claim that they're doing something, when in fact, we now have 500 different reading curriculums being taught in this state. In the state of Mississippi, they have 6. Mississippi's gone from 49th in the country in reading to 9th by having teaching phonics, having clear educational standards designed by educators, not changing the curriculum every 5 years, by holding the principals accountable. Nothing about that is Republican or Democrat. You look at how many times we've changed economic development strategy, from Granholm and the MAGA credits to Snyder coming in saying we're not going to do any incentives at all, to then Snyder realizing that was too far and modifying it, to the SOAR project, which we started giving away massive amounts of cash up front, to now the reaction to SOAR, where we're doing no incentives at all. Who in the world would invest in this state when you don't know from one cycle to the next what are your policies going to be? And so the only way to get to a point to end what I call ping pong politics is to build coalitions from the middle. So every election isn't the most important election in history. That if the Republicans win the House the next time, it's not a big deal, because we've developed a school and accountability program that had both parties support. That we have an economic development strategy, which Ohio has done so successfully. Great cooperation between a Republican governor and a Democratic mayor in Columbus that right now is eating our lunch. But they're not bouncing back and forth. They've got a bipartisan policy that is competing. There is no reason in the world Columbus, Ohio has any advantage over Michigan when you given the quality of life here. What they have is a leadership advantage because they've got stability. So I thought when I started out, in December, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. Nobody ever heard of an independent before. But I went around to houses in 2013 where they hadn't seen a white candidate for mayor in 40 years. And once people had a chance to sit and talk, you've seen what the momentum is like everywhere in the state. We're going to have three major labor unions that are going to release their endorsements of me in the next 3 days. We're watching basically the underpinnings of the Democratic Party collapse in people saying, you know what, I keep funding this and I keep getting nowhere. I've funded a Democratic trifecta and I got nowhere. We're tired of politics as usual. And so I'm educating people on the fact that under Michigan law, in a November election, you can vote straight ticket Democrat and you can vote for Mike for independent. You can vote straight ticket Republican and you can vote for Mike for independent, and those votes all count. And we're educating voters on that. And as people understand that, I'm not saying to people leave your party. I'm saying I'm going to get the parties to work together responsibly, support whichever party you're with, but also tell them you want this divisiveness and this toxic. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. The budget was supposed to be passed July 1st. Here we are, mid-September. Schools in this state couldn't hire extra teachers. Large numbers of them have bigger class sizes than a year ago because they didn't have a budget and time to do anything about it. This kind of nonsense has to come to an end. And for those of you who are tired of it, I hope you'll support me. And for those of you who think you can win the ping pong game, you'll keep doing what you're doing. I guess with that, Melissa, I'll take any questions.
Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. For one, I think everyone has looked at this run as an independent and said, wow, I mean, this is a really unique opportunity, right? In the state of Michigan, I think I looked it up and there hasn't ever been an actual real viable candidate. I think a guy by the name of Tisch was the last one and he got 2% of the vote. And that was some many years ago. And in the country that we've only had 6. But what it feels like in the state of Michigan is that because it's you and the work that you've done, you're really making this a really viable candidacy because there is an interest in getting out of what feels like exactly what you said, that ping pong politics. But one question I have for you is, how do you create what is real expectations versus reality, right? Because I think what we saw in the last session with the trifecta was everyone had these great expectations of what they were going to get out of a trifecta. And yet it's hard, as you know, to actually implement sometimes because it doesn't always work that way. And so when you're bringing your stakeholders in, hoping for real change, how do you create and level set expectations of what reality is and policy making and dealing with both sides to come to that agreement?
Lansing is broken and you have to change it. And if you think about what is happening right now, the every Democrat and every Republican in a swing seat, by September of 2026, their pollster is going to be saying, Mike Duggan's independent voters are going to decide your election. They're going to decide Kristen McDowell-Rivers' election. They're going to decide the U.S. Senate election. And they're going to decide every swing House and Senate seat. Because if you're a hardcore Republican or Democrat, you're locked in. And so what you are going to see happen, I believe, is the Democrats and Republicans in these swing areas are going to have to gravitate to my position. And they're going to have to commit that if I get elected governor, they're going to work with me. Otherwise, they're going to lose. And the one thing I'm sure of is they care more about winning than they do about party. So I intend to fundamentally change the debate. I can't tell you how many Republican and Democratic legislators have called me and said, I have a better chance of winning if I endorse you. And I had to say all of them. I had 200 elected officials endorse me at an event we had at the train station a month ago, almost all local officials. I had to say to legislators, you don't want to do this yet because they'll cut you off. And you saw the Democrats went through a fit, tried to shut off the 100 or so elected officials who endorsed me, which turned it into 125 a week later when the others were pissed. But I believe we can change it. And when I sit down and say, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to put in a phonics curriculum for third graders that's written by educators. I want small class sizes for the kids when they learn to read. I want tutors for kids who are falling behind. And I want a commitment that for 5 years, we don't change the curriculum. There's nothing about those things that's either Republican or Democrat. Okay,
Right.
teachers are in favor of it, superintendents are in favor of it, parents are in favor of it. But right now, if you try to have this conversation in Lansing, both sides are going to figure out, how do I use it to my advantage? Because with this 2018 Senate split and this 58-52 House split, they don't care about anything in the world about how they get the majority or keep the majority. You're dealing with this every day. And it's not going to be any different 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 6 years from now. It's going to be closely divided, back and forth. But what happens if we pass a school funding plan? And by that, I don't think we need more taxes. I think we need to prioritize some of the other things in the budget, make the superintendents accountable. What happens if we agree on an economic development strategy that says, we don't give big checks up front, but we will give you a discount on your taxes going forward. That's been Detroit's policy for 12 years. It's how I got all these plants built, the train station built, the Hudson site built, is you can earn those tax breaks by actually building and hiring people, and you earn the tax breaks as you build. So Ford Motor Company, for example, is going to pay us $300 million in taxes instead of $400 million. Before they came in, I had an empty building covered with graffiti. I wasn't getting anything. There's no reason you can't get Republicans and Democrats to agree on that kind of a policy. And that's what I think I can do. And I guess the question, Melissa, is if my solution isn't the solution, you tell me what's going to be any different. Now, people, a lot of my friends dropped $100 million to flip the Democratic House Republican. And what you got, nothing being done. You can keep spending $100 and $200 million in a cycle. They have evenly divided legislature, nothing done. Or you can support whoever the hell you want for the legislature and elect me governor, and I'm going to work together.
I think there'd be a lot of excitement over that right now, Mr. Mayor. So we sit here without a budget for sure. So, well, I just want to let everyone know who is in our attendees here that we would love to take questions. The mayor would love to take questions. So please put them in the chat and I will get to those. We do have one question, so that it was, I don't have a name associated with it, Mr. Mayor, but they asked if you could talk about what can be done to support safety net healthcare providers, especially that
Absolutely.
serve the uninsured and Medicaid
Absolutely.
patients.
And so I was just up in Port Austin at one of what we refer to as critical access hospitals. And for those who aren't familiar, you have a special category in the federal law for Medicare and for Medicaid as well, so that you have hospitals that if they weren't there, you'd have to drive another 30 or 45 minutes to deliver a baby or to be in an emergency room. And they've always had supplemental funding. I was, of course, as the CEO of the Detroit Medical Center, I was on the board of the Michigan Hospital Association. And we would always build alliances between the big systems and the small systems. And so nobody knows more about Medicaid and Medicare than I do. I lived it for 9 years in the hospital system that saw more Medicaid patients than any in the country. It's a number of things we can do. One is, obviously, we have to guarantee funding for the critical access hospitals. But second, people are assuming that these huge cuts are going to take effect because the biggest cut in the federal law is the Medicaid work requirement. And they're assuming everybody is going to drop off of Medicaid eligibility and put the work requirement in. I don't think that's true. If you actually read the law says you could be working, or the law says you could be taking a GED course and you qualify. You could be taking a job training course, you can qualify. Or you can be working as a volunteer in your local neighborhood center or a food shelter or anything like that, and you qualify. The problem is that if you don't make it easy for the Medicaid recipients to check the box on what they did, they're going to be knocked out of eligibility. Now, this is more detail probably than you want to hear, but when I was at DMC, we would have every day patients come into the emergency room uninsured who would have been eligible, but they never enrolled. I set up Medicaid enrollment staff in every one of my hospital emergency rooms. And we enrolled them not just that day, but put them in. And I was just amazed at the way state government made it difficult for you to enroll. I am going to set up the easiest enrollment and work requirement certification process anywhere in the country. We are going to see far few people get dropped from coverage as a result, so that it'll strengthen all the hospitals. It's not just the critical access hospitals that are concerned right now, but we absolutely will make sure there's funding for the critical care access hospitals in the small communities in the state.
Well, I think your role in leading the DMC will help bring that knowledge of how to help the healthcare system tremendously to the state too. So I think that's a piece that we have many clients who have been extremely worried about kind of the future of that. And I think appreciate, your recognition of how we can at least ensure communication and help to ensure access for those individuals, because that is from our client base, a very large concern for many of the providers that we work for too.
Well, and Melissa, as you know, the providers know this won't mean anything to anybody else, but the provider taxes, the so-called QAP program, which has kept the hospitals afloat, I helped write it when I was on the board of MHA. It is something I understand inside and out, and I will make sure that we access every dollar that can possibly be accessed. I love the fact, one of the things the governor's doing, she keeps getting criticized for going and visiting President Trump, but one of the things, in addition to saving the Selfridge Air Force Base, is she has been urging him to phase in the reductions in the Medicaid cuts over more years. And if she can get an extra year or two out of it to give me a little bit more breathing room, it'll even be better. But I can tell you, you can pick anybody you want this state to be governor, and nobody's going to understand how to protect hospitals and Medicaid and Medicare better than I will.
We have a couple more questions along. Let's see. One question just before I get to some of these questions online, it just kind of I think flows into what you've been saying on the healthcare. I mean, a lot of the concern is coming from what the federal government has been doing lately. And you talk about your ability to work, obviously, between parties, and having the ability to work with the Trump administration throughout your tenure will be really important to make sure that we can manage what is happening from the federal government on down. You mentioned with your partnership on kind of the criminal justice side of it and what you've been able to do there. How do you see that relationship being able to continue and really help the rest of what we're doing in the state of Michigan?
So remember, I already lived through Trump once. I was the mayor in his first term, and you never saw a war between the Trump administration and me. I had a good working relationship with them. We were never a sanctuary city, which triggers a lot of the president's attention. But then Ben Carson was the HUD secretary who came from Detroit. I had him and his wife here at the Manoogian, where I am now, for dinner, and built relationships, and we got funding to replace, to abate lead from homeowners in Southwest Detroit. I found ways to build partnerships. Since Donald Trump got elected this last time, I'd ask your people who are listening, you have not seen in all the conversation of the National Guard, you have not once heard Donald Trump say Detroit. Nobody from the White House has said Detroit. Nobody from the Justice Department has said Detroit. The reason is that we are at record lows in shootings and homicides. This year will be the lowest probably since 1964. But we partnered with the Trump Justice Department. When the president appointed the new U.S. Attorney, Jerome Gorgan, here, who was a career prosecutor, the chief and I sat with him and said, here's what we need. We need a lot more gun prosecutors coming from the feds. We need ATF and DEA to help us do these raids to get the guns off the street. We have got more federal focus on gun violence this year than we've had going back 25 years when I was the prosecutor. And the shootings are down, and the administration is happy. Now, I can't predict what the president may or may not say tomorrow. But when you see the president say National Guard into DC, National Guard into Chicago, National Guard into Memphis, when you sit down with people and say, look, we can both get credit and actually bring the violence down, this is what we've done. Now, maybe Trump will surprise me and put Detroit in his story next week, but we are now 9 months in, and you have not seen a single fight between the city of Detroit and the president. I'm going to try to find common ground every chance I can.
We'll be happy to keep them not from coming to Michigan and Detroit. I'm going to get to some of the questions from some of our clients here. So the first question is from Ron Berenke, who is the executive director of the American Council of Engineering Companies. He said, as you mentioned, businesses need stability and to know what to expect. If the legislature fails to address the funding shortfall approaching for transportation, what will you do as governor to provide a long-term sustainable funding solution for Michigan's transportation system?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, predictability is everything. And what I did with city council, we had not had a new manufacturing company come to Detroit in 20 years when I got elected. But I had a 20% unemployment rate and a whole lot of people with high school degrees who wanted to work. And I sat down with Mary Barra and Bill Ford and Sergio Marchione, who was running Fiat Chrysler. I said, tell me what it takes to land the next supplier plant in the city of Detroit. And they took me through what they wanted, and they needed, of course, vacant land. I said, I got a lot of that. They would like prompt approval by city council without drama. They want discounts on the taxes. They want a really fast permitting system, which when you come out of a hospital system, you understand lean processing. So I did set up the easiest permitting system anywhere in the country for building. And they want a workforce. I sat down with city council members and I said, okay, here's what we're going to offer. We are not going to offer anybody cash up front on a deal, but we are going to offer them discounts when they build in an area we have vacant buildings. And I need you all to be upfront on this because when I make a deal, I can't have you guys creating a sideshow at city council. And so, when we did the train station, it would have paid $400 million over 30 years. We struck a deal for $300 million, and now we've got a couple thousand people working there. Every single time, because we lined up and got agreement ahead of time, city council approved all of them. We've now got $10 billion in investment in the city of Detroit, all of it with the support of city council without drama. And so now your question on the infrastructure is the same thing. I mean, it is crazy to have a massive amount of road building in a couple of years because of a bond issue and then have none, right? What happens to your contractor capacity? I think they put too much money into the system too fast as opposed to phasing it in, but it's going to be a whole lot worse if it drops off. And so I actually think the governor is going to get a deal done this year on roads. But in the event that she doesn't, I'm going to do what I do, which is get people in a room. And right now, you're seeing Matt Hall and Winnie Brinks think somehow this road funding argument is making them look good. And certainly the governor knows not making anybody in Michigan look good. But I'm going to predict on this one, I actually think Gretchen Whitmer is going to get this done before the end of the year.
Well, we hope so, for sure. We have also a lot of clients that are hoping that that is a fact. Another question that has come through is, we'd love to hear your thoughts on travel tourism, events funding, and Pure Michigan. I'm going to wrap this into just kind of another part of this question because I think it all really fits together because we're seeing this as part of at least the House proposed plan, which is really elimination and great reduction in both Pure Michigan funding, but also our funding for our arts and cultural organizations across the state. And a lot of people, based on this question, are seeing that as the frosting, on the budget, the state budget. Can you talk about those types of fundings, whether it's for Pure Michigan and travel and tourism or cultural industries, as the economic tools for the state and the importance in our state budget?
So those are two different questions. Number one, I'm 100% behind Pure Michigan, and I'm going to expand the funding. I have not found a tourism center in this state that doesn't believe Pure Michigan has a major effect on their bottom line. And you have a whole bunch of economies of a whole bunch of lakefront communities, and then other communities like Frankenmuth that aren't lakefront but have their own draws, Gaylord and the like. If you are not supporting those small communities in their economy, they're going to be left behind, and we're just going to accelerate the young people leaving. To me, it's like the critical access hospitals. Vast stretches of this state have been ignored. So I absolutely will expand Pure Michigan funding. The arts question is a whole different question. The city of Detroit had 200,000 people move out in the decade before I got elected. And I said my goal was to change that and grow the population. And last year, we added 7,000 people. We led the state of Michigan in population growth. The arts and culture has been a huge part of what we built, along with the riverfront, along with entertainment options. There are two places in this state young people are moving. It's Detroit and Grand Rapids. Both of them are doing exactly the same thing: riverfront, entertainment, arts, and culture. It is driving it, and it has to be, if we are going to keep the young people in the state, arts and culture has to be center to what we are doing.
Well, we're once again really glad to hear that today is the Cultural Advocacy Network Day in Lansing, trying to help promote those arts programs that have been eliminated from the budget. So a governor that believes and promotes that would be a very welcome thing for our clients here as well. One other question that we have, Mr. Mayor, that's popped up so far is from Greg Bird with the Michigan Vegetable Council. And he says, maybe not in your wheelhouse, but where do you see the Michigan agricultural industry during your terms?
So I'm spending a lot of time on the farms. And man, do these farmers feel like they're being ignored by everybody. And so, whether it's having enough processing facilities nearby, whether it's having Eagle making prompt decisions on issues that don't hold you up, whether it's making sure you have the best technical support from the Department of Agriculture, or whether it's just managing the damn deer population, which, as I've learned, is wreaking havoc both on the crops and the automobiles in parts of the state. And so this is the thing. When I ran for mayor, I went into neighborhoods in the city that no white person had been in years. And ultimately, I was supported in those neighborhoods. I am now going to every corner of this state and sitting down, and folks who sit with me and say, what does the mayor of Detroit know about us? We've been forgotten here in this farmland. And said, I know a lot about representing people who've been forgotten. I can show you a lot of Detroiters who lived on a block with abandoned houses and no street lights and no parks, and the ambulance didn't show up. We didn't complain about it. We solved the problem. Let's talk about your problems. So spending a lot of time with all of the different crop councils and learning an enormous amount. I'm going to have a real agricultural plan on how to build that part of the economy. We've got a lot of folks who are afraid they're going to lose their way of life and who don't want to. And I want to make sure you want to keep farming, you have the financial ability to do it.
Well, we'll invite you to the Michigan Vegetable Council's
we
big
go.
expo, and you'll get to meet a lot of those folks here too. So I'm going to return to the topic of education because I know we've heard you talk a lot about this. I know you presented on it at the Detroit Regional Chamber Conference and various places, and you spoke a bit about it today of, where we are really failing in our kids in this state. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about your plan to move this state forward. This, again, is a very important place for a lot of our clients. We have a very large client base in the K-12 space that is going to be really interested in your plans here.
So, Melissa, if I lose you because I'm not technical and my battery dies, I will dial immediately back in on another case. Don't get concerned. But anybody who wants to can go on YouTube and see my speech at Mackinac. And I think I laid it out in great detail. But I believe we got to do a few things. One, I think we need to cut 2% of the discretionary money in the rest of the budget and move it to education. If you run a business and you can't cut 2% for your priorities, you ought not to be running your organization. That would get us $4.5 billion over 5 years off of a $20 billion budget. It would allow principals and superintendents to plan multi-year out. Second, I want to have a reading curriculum that is written by educators that does not change. We've talked about that at length. Third, Michigan has dramatically gutted our career technical education program. They did it by adopting this so-called merit curriculum in 2011, where we decided as a state that every single kid was going to be completely prepared to go to college. and put them through multi-years of science and history and language and math, even if they didn't need it. And what happened is the way the CTE programs have always worked is you spend a half a day at your base high school, a half a day at your CTE high school. You could be certified in welding in a year. When they put in all these mandatory classes, they gutted the amount of time available to CTE. Enrollment dropped off, funding dropped off, and even the state superintendent says more than a third of the districts in the state are a CTE wasteland. We are short tens of thousands of people in electrical work, iron work, plumbing, culinary arts, tech programming, all kinds of things that you could have. So I want to triple the funding going into CTE and celebrate when these kids are 14 years old that there are multiple life choices. College is a great choice, but there's a lot of other great choices that don't require college. Let's expose these kids to them when they're freshmen in high school and let them choose. And then when you do all of these things, you give the superintendents the curriculum doesn't change in the money and the principals, and you hold them accountable. And I've said this, and I'm not going to deviate from it. If in the first year, as a principal, you're not succeeding, we give you resources, you have an action plan. If in the second year you're still declining, you get one last chance. In the third year, if you're declining again, you're fired, and we'll replace you. And if by the fifth year the school is declining, we fire the superintendent. And when I rolled this out at Mackinac, the first guy that walked out the door with all the TV cameras was Ken Gutman, who is the chief superintendent of Oakland County Schools. And they all came around and said, "What do you think about the mayor saying you should be fired?" He said, "Well, at first I was shocked. Then I started to think about it. If you give me the tools and the funding and I'm not doing my job in 5 years, I should be fired. I support his plan." And I think most educators feel this way, that if you actually gave them a clear plan and gave them clear funding, that they ought to be held accountable. But that's a different tone than anybody in Lansing's been willing to set. I asked these superintendents, not one of them can name a principal in the last decade who has been fired for poor academic performance, despite the fact we've gone from 19th to 44th in the country. Literally, the principals and superintendents are not being held accountable. I want to give them the resources, and then I want to hold them accountable. It'll be a different day.
Do you think with this change that we'll start to see a turnaround for teacher recruitment? Because that seems to be a significant issue as well of how do we recruit teachers and retain teachers in this environment?
And so I go back to the hospital days. You had to develop your own nursing pipeline, right? Because we had nursing shortages all the time. And it was the same kind of thing. You wanted senior nurses to train your junior nurses to raise your care. But if you can't afford to take the senior nurses off the floor, you never get any better. And so we developed our own nurse training programs, expanded class sizes, partnered with different schools to staff up. This state has to make a decision to increase the teacher pipeline through mentorship programs, through a whole range of recruitment programs and the like, because if you're going to get teachers in the classroom to improve, they need master teachers who help coach them up. You don't need to discipline the teachers. You need to give teachers the kind of help to coach up. You can't afford to pull the master teachers out of the classroom today. And so how we build a bigger base is a key part of turning the system around.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, folks, we have time for just a couple more questions. Be sure if you want them asked to put them in the chat. One question that's come on from Janet Krieger from the Michigan Historic Preservation Network is, what are going to be your programs in support of housing? Many programs now seem to be emphasizing new construction when in fact the adaptive reuse of existing buildings commonly can be better addressing your price points. And bonus, they often are walkable and they attract both old and new buyers and everyone in between. And they add design interest to communities.
Well, Detroit right now is the U.S. center of adaptive reuse. The David Whitney office building has been vacant for a decade, has been renovated and is now reopened as housing. The David Stott building that had been abandoned office building, the Book building that were abandoned office buildings have been renovated for housing. But we also have vacant apartment buildings all through this city. There's got to be 40 or 50 of them that have been renovated, and we have built $1.6 billion in affordable housing in the last 5 years. And with my partnership with Detroit City Council, we just did under the state's pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes plan, which allows cities to give property tax breaks to people who build affordable housing. We offered an option of a 100% tax abatement for 15 years if you take a vacant building and renovate it, because we don't need these vacant buildings in the neighborhood. And so I think we got 40 projects in the pipeline, nearly every one of them vacant buildings being reused. And so I'm a great believer that you preserve as much of your historical architecture as you possibly can.
Wonderful. Well, I think we have one last question and then one last comment. I think I just want to return to the economic development portion of your comments, and we really appreciate all the great work that's been done. Obviously, we say what a transformation you've brought to the city of Detroit and the way you've done it. A lot of comments we've heard about the great work that's ongoing in Ohio because of the consistency with the Jobs Ohio program that they have. You know, it's doesn't leave politics really to get involved, but it has a consistent program over time. Do you see something like that for Michigan in what you're hoping to develop from an economic development standpoint, or is it something different that you believe we would need to grow our programs?
I'm spending a lot of time in Silicon Valley with the major companies. I keep getting invited out there to give them advice on how to turn San Francisco around. I was on one conference a few months ago where I spoke after Elon Musk and ahead of Sam Altman, and they keep inviting me out to talk about downtown San Francisco, which is actually going the right direction right now. But when I go, I say, you have to do something for me. You've got to tell me what it would take for Detroit and Michigan to be on the radar the next time you're going to locate a tech company outside of Silicon Valley. I spent a lot of time with them. Again, we can talk about this for hours, but to start with, as they've all explained to me, the amount of investment in this country moving into AI is astronomical. You can't believe the massive amount of investment going there. That is going to states that have huge data warehouses because these AI companies consume huge amounts of data. Michigan is behind in the data warehouse building process. Data warehouses consume a huge amount of energy. And as they say to me, all we know about Michigan is every time you guys have a storm, you've got a bunch of power outages. Why would we build there? If we are going to build the economy of the future, it's not as simple as, oh, let's put together a venture capital fund and give people research credits. Those are good things. But you are going to have to deal with the fact this state currently imports 10 or 15% of our power. The Palisades decision the governor made is the right one on the nuclear plant in the western part of the state. We have got to speed up natural gas. We have got to speed up solar. In Detroit, I'm building 200 acres of solar panels right now that are under construction to power all the buildings. It is not a one versus another. If we are going to be competitive on the tech economy of the future, we have to face reality. And reality is we're behind on the power grid. We're behind on the data warehouses. We have advantages like our education system. The University of Michigan is one of the top suppliers of software engineers to Silicon Valley. We've got a lot of things going for us. What we haven't had is leadership in building up the infrastructure.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think we have one last comment from a client. I believe it's a really wonderful way to end this great webinar, is from Bridget Clark Whitney from Kids Food Basket, which is a fabulous organization that serves West Michigan. But what she has to say is, and it's a comment only, Mr. Mayor Duggan, you are truly awesome. Thank you so much for your hard work for our state. What a gift you are to our children's future. And
I gotta come visit you when I come to Grand Rapids.
Yes, you absolutely do, because it is an incredible organization serving so many of our children, and they're just, you have to see it because it is really awe-inspiring. But we want to thank you so much for your time today. On behalf of all of Kelly Cawthorn's clients, we really appreciate all the great work you're doing for not only the city, but the state. And we look forward to this campaign and being a partner with you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.